Chapter 23. At dawn, a few days later, Nathaniel lingered overhanging the horses, slowly shaking the dried grass to separate it into airy mounds. It was so peaceful in the gray-lit barn. He hated to leave it. The whole town was on edge, awaiting the showdown between Patrick Henry and his militia and the governor and his Marines. The tension within Eden's workshop was nearly unbearable as well. With only Ben and Nathaniel left, Eden's paranoia festered. His tirades about the colonists and their conspiracies were filled with more and more curses. Ben's attitude worsened Nathaniel's jitters. He'd become blatantly reckless. Nathaniel had found him standing in the street, scribbling on a paper right in front of the McGuire's house. "How do you spell guard?" he asked Nathaniel when he approached. "I don't know," Nathaniel answered. "G-A-R-D? What are you doing?" He peered at Ben's messy writing. It was hard to decipher, but Nathaniel could make out Shawnee and musket. He gasped. "Are Indians coming?" "Nay," Ben answered without looking at Nathaniel. He kept writing. "The governor is arming the palace with them." "But the Shawnee are his hostages. Basil says he shows them only to his dinner guests." Ben smirked. "Basil doesn't know anything. Look up at that window." He pointed to a second-story corner window of the governor's palace. Nathaniel looked. "I don't see anything, Ben." Ben glanced up and frowned. "Well, he was there a minute ago, a great, huge savage holding a musket. Look there." He gestured to another window. "See that slave?" This time Nathaniel could indeed see an African servant looking out the window. "But what of it?" "They're keeping guard," Ben spoke impatiently, reading Nathaniel's thoughts. "I followed one of Dunmore's maids to the market and asked her how things are inside the palace. She told me that the governor had dozens of muskets loaded and he had shown all the men servants how to fire them." "Why are you writing that down, Ben?" "To give this information to the right people. We're watching to see what Dunmore will try next." Nathaniel couldn't believe how foolhardy Ben was being, acting as a spy for the very people Eden raged about. He was like a flint that could set off a wildfire with one strike. "You better stop, Ben. What if Master McGuire sees you?" "So what if he does?" Ben dismissed Nathaniel. "What Master McGuire thinks or does is of little consequence in what is about to happen. Besides, I've given a report on him as well that should silence him soon enough." And with that, Ben stalked away. Worrying over that conversation, Nathaniel had nearly jumped a foot when a swallow shot out the barn door just above his head. Normally, the swift's darting flight in and out of the eaves never startled him. Now a rustling in the hayloft sent a tingle along the back of his neck. He paused in his work, cocked his head and listened. Nothing. He must have been imagining it. He shook his head to steady himself. He poured fresh water into the trough. Wait, there it was again. Louder. Too large a sound for mice or birds. Nathaniel's hands began to shake a bit. He listened. Once more it came. Slowly, Nathaniel reached for the pitchfork. It probably was a mother raccoon trying to nest in the straw, a dry, warm place for her young. But that could be dangerous. Raccoons loved to pick up the bits of oats dropped from the horse's feed bin, and a mother raccoon was very aggressive. It could bite a horse and sever tendons. Nathaniel would have to run it off. Holding the pitchfork, he climbed the ladder. Somehow, in a flash of shadow and movement, up and out of the straw, a huge, strong body arose and pinned Nathaniel to the floor, pressing the fork's prongs against his throat. Gasping, Nathaniel stared into the eyes of a very angry African. "Please," he whispered, "let go." "Not a word, boy, or I'll push this fork right through you." "I," Nathaniel whimpered, fighting off a wrenching cough from the pressure of the pitchfork and the man's arm across his chest. "Wake up," the man hissed. There was more rustling in the hay. "Hurry, the household is up. I've got one here." Another figure rose behind the man atop Nathaniel. He was enormous too. "Wait a minute." Nathaniel focused through the gloom. "Wasn't that—" No, that's Nathaniel. Get off." With 2 easy lifts, Moses pulled the man away and Nathanael to his feet. "Sorry, boy." Moses brushed him off. His companion glanced nervously over his shoulder and said, "How'd we fall asleep? We best move on. Fast." Moses took Nathanael by the shoulders. "You got money?" Nathanael nodded. He had his 1 precious shilling that Patrick Henry's son had given him. "Why, what are you doing here, Moses? Did you run off again?" "Oh, Moses, what will they do if they catch you this time?" "That's why I need money." "But why did you come back into Williamsburg, Moses? There are slave patrols all over town, and they're really watching because Lord Dunmore said there was an uprising." Moses rubbed his forehead and sighed heavily. His companion sneered and spat. "We came because we hear the governor promised to free the slaves and that Williamsburg folk were after him. So me and Robin and a couple others left the farms to help. Went straight to the palace last night to say we stand with him. His men turned us away and locked the gate." Bitter disappointment and confusion puckered his face. Roosters began to crow. "We gots to go, Moses." His friend tugged urgently on Moses' sleeve. "I told you this was a fool idea. This boy ain't got money." Moses spoke in a tumble. "Since the governor turned us away, we heading to the Chesapeake, Nathaniel. Last month, we was delivering and picking up at the Norfolk docks. I met a Captain Collins. He say the British Navy was looking for men what know the Virginia waters. My master was right there, so there was naught I could do then, but word all along the river is now's the time to run. There's a boatman say he sail me right up to the Magdalene, what the captain command, but I gots to pay him, Nathaniel, a whole pound. A pound for me and a pound for Robin here. You know where we can find 2 pounds, boy?" Nathaniel took off his shoe and pulled the shilling out of it. "I need more than that, boy." Moses looked at him hard. "I was glad to do it, Nathaniel, but I saved your skin once or twice, didn't I?" Nathaniel hung his head. "More than once or twice, Moses," he whispered. He stuck the shilling back into his shoe. "I need you now, Nathaniel. I need your help. There must be money somewhere about this house, please." For the first time Nathaniel could remember, Moses looked frightened and vulnerable. He had to help. Full light was coming on strong. He'd have to hurry. There was only one place Nathaniel knew he could get his hands on money quickly without getting caught. That was the small tin box Basil kept under the foot of his mattress. Changing the ad about John's whereabouts had given Nathaniel new pluck, and God knew Moses was a true friend who deserved his loyalty. He didn't stop to consider or to worry about consequences. Within 5 minutes, Nathaniel had slipped into the house, fished out 2 pounds from Basil's meager savings while he snored, and sent Moses out into the growing light of day. Patrick Henry did not halt his march at Ruffin's Ferry as Lord Dunmore ordered. Enraged, Dunmore sent his wife and children to safety aboard the HMS Fowey, a warship just off Yorktown. The captain of the Fowey announced he would bombard Yorktown if any harm came to Lord Dunmore. Under those threats to the populace, Henry finally halted at Duncastle's Ordinary, about 15 miles west of Williamsburg. But he sent some of his men to kidnap the governor's receiver general to force payment for the stolen gunpowder. Retaliating, Dunmore promised to spread devastation as far as he could reach. With several British warships and Marines at his command, Dunmore could certainly do it. Once again, Peyton Randolph and other moderates scrambled to reach a compromise. Under pressure from them, Henry accepted 330 pounds for the gunpowder. He vowed to use the money to buy replacement gunpowder. Warning his troops to remain vigilant, he sent them home. Henry himself turned northward toward Philadelphia to take his seat at the Continental Congress already in session. Firing a parting shot at Henry, Dunmore declared him an outlaw. He warned Virginians not to aid, abet, or give countenance to the said Patrick Henry. But Henry was too popular, too much the symbol of eloquent, steel-hard bravery, too much the voice of liberty. People turned out in legions to cheer and protect him from arrest. One after another, their fifes and drums playing, county volunteer troops escorted Henry across their borders on his trip north to Philadelphia. When Henry reached the Potomac River separating Virginia and Maryland, the ferryman fed him and rowed him over for free. Only a few Virginians accompanied Henry across, since it was easy to see the flags and bright-colored jackets of the Maryland volunteers awaiting him on the other side. Once Henry was gone, calm somehow returned. It was the homecoming of the beloved Lady Dunmore that seemed to reassure Williamsburg the most. She would talk sense to her belligerent husband, said townspeople, and surely Dunmore would not recall his family if he planned more treachery. Dunmore even reinstated the House of Burgesses and called it to reconvene in June. Although some feared it was merely a trap to arrest colonial leaders, others hoped it meant Henry's daring had convinced Dunmore to cooperate. A kind of wary optimism hung about the city and quieted its streets. That was when Nathaniel's life erupted. Nathaniel, Basil called to him one evening about the time they typically played flutes together. Yes, master? Nathaniel sensed from Basil's stern tone that what he had been dreading was about to happen. I am missing money, Nathaniel. Know you of it? Nathaniel swallowed hard, and lied. Nay, master. Basil stood silent, watching him carefully. Nathaniel tried to keep his eyes steadily on Basil's, but he began to squirm and his gaze dropped. Basil sighed heavily. Then he spoke in hoarse sadness. I think the weather is warm enough for you to resume sleeping in the stable. Nathaniel felt a stab in his heart that made him dizzy, but he managed a feeble, Aye, master. Tell him. Nathaniel's mind screamed. Tell him why? But Nathaniel didn't trust Basil to protect Moses, didn't trust him to understand, still didn't know how to trust. He picked up his few possessions and made for the door. Wait, Basil spoke. Oh, please, thought Nathaniel, please don't banish me this way. But still he did not speak, did not offer the old man any explanation. Basil handed him something wrapped in a linen cloth. Happy birthday, Nathaniel, he said, and turned away. Alone, up in the hayloft, Nathaniel unwrapped the package. Inside were two gifts, a book, The American Instructor or Young Man's Best Companion, and a wooden fife. Flipping through the book, he found exercises in reading and arithmetic, ways to improve himself and his opportunities, ways to groom his God-given reason and intellect to make his own destiny, just as Basil had told him. Tearfully, Nathaniel put it aside. With shaking hands, he held the fife to his lips and blew a high-pitched note, a sound he knew called soldiers to duty, a sound that sang of liberty. He knew Basil had meant it to be a symbolic as well as musical gift. Nathaniel dropped his face into his hands and sobbed. Basil would never feel the same about him now that he thought Nathaniel was a thief and a liar. Oh, if only he had explained. The sorrow he felt was almost unbearable, because this time Nathaniel knew that his trouble, his loss, were his own fault. He could not blame it on an unjust fate or the brutality of his masters. His situation was born of his own actions, his own choices. He was responsible. If that's what liberty meant, it was a cruel and hard price to pay for it. Part 7. June 1775. Come join hand in hand, all ye true loyal souls. 'Tis liberty calls, let's fill up our bowls. We'll toast all the lovers of freedom's good cause. America's sons will support all our laws. Our firelocks are good, let fair freedom ne'er yield. We're always ready, steady boys, steady. By Jove, we'll be free or we'll die in the field. Though the lords and the commons may rail in the house, at our patriot assembles we don't care a souse. We'll keep cheerful spirits nor mind their commands. The sun of fair liberty will shine o'er our lands. A liberty song composed at a town meeting in Chester. Chapter 24. If master sees you doing that, you'll catch it, you know. Nathaniel glanced up at Ben. For the past week, Nathaniel had been slipping into the shop even earlier than usual to use the pen and ink on Eden's desk. Do you see him coming? No, but it's well past his time, Nathaniel answered. He watched Nathaniel finish a capital D with an elaborate curlicue at its top and a perfect backstroke at its bottom. "Very nice, Nat," he murmured. "You could be an excellent secretary or bookkeeper with that penmanship." "Really?" In fact, Ben puffed himself up and jokingly threw out his chest and lower lip. "You can be my secretary when I'm elected to the Continental Congress, or mayhap when I'm governor of Virginia." He grinned. "Yes, I like the sound of that. You and me running Virginia, Nat. What say you?" Nathaniel blew on the letter to dry the ink, ignoring Ben's fantasies. The older boy was so full of himself these days, but he did linger on one thing, being a secretary or bookkeeper. Nathaniel hadn't really given a thought to the advantage good cursive might give him for a trade once he was free of his indenture. He was simply trying to win back Basil's friendship with it. When Basil had sent him to live again in the stable, Nathaniel thought he might die of the ache in his heart. Basil had not sought him out to play music at night or to read from his novels ever since. Nathaniel had lain in the hay in the stable's loft and listened to Basil playing his violin or his flute alone. There were no jaunty jigs or quick-paced allegros with their dazzling run of notes or bravado of trills. Basil played melancholy tunes, one after another. Selfishly, Nathaniel took hope in their sad sound that Basil was missing his company too, but he knew that part of it was Basil's deep disappointment in him. Unwittingly, Nathaniel had fulfilled the prophecy of the abusive blacksmith from whom Basil had saved him. Nathaniel had indeed robbed Basil as he slept, so in the stable Nathaniel hid, despairing until the evening light of May lasted long enough to prompt him to pick up the book Basil had given him. Nathaniel wound his way through its words. In Basil's gift he had found an idea. Perhaps if he completed the spelling and arithmetic exercises in the book, Basil would be proud of Nathaniel's effort. Mayhap it would rekindle Basil's interest in him as a student. Basil loved to teach anybody who would listen, really. Nathaniel realized it was his best chance. The problem, of course, was how to record his work. Most pupils used chalk on slate hornbooks, erasing their work after their tutor approved it. Nathaniel had none, and certainly he could not afford the purchase of paper, pen, and ink. But one night he came up with a solution. The loft's floor could be his tablet. Nathaniel took a piece of chalk from Eden's desk, justifying that bit of thievery by the end result and the hard work he did about the place. Hour after hour, Nathaniel lay on his stomach, scratching spelling words and math problems onto the planed pine wood. He covered them all with hay to keep them from smearing away and to keep his project secret from Ben, who came up at night sometimes to tell Nathaniel about his gallivanting about town. Nathaniel didn't want anything ruining his surprise for Basil. What Nathaniel was writing now was a thank you note for the book in Fife. With it, Nathaniel could approach Basil to start a conversation. Then he would invite the old tutor to the stable to see his work. For that note, he had taken a sheet of Eden's paper and was using his ink and quill pen. He knew it was dangerous, but he was almost finished. The D he had just completed was part of his signature. Only 3 more letters, U-N-N, to write. But today was not the time. Eden would come into the shop any minute. Ben was right. Nathaniel carefully folded the paper along the creases he had made the previous days and tucked it into his waistcoat. "You should have come with me to the illumination last night," Ben chided Nathaniel. "There's no use sulking in the loft." What was it for? Nathaniel had heard the church bells and seen that every household window glowed with candlelight. It was to honor Peyton Randolph. He's back from Philadelphia for the session of the House that Governor Dunmore called. But nobody trusts that Scottish snake. General Gage has authorized the lobsterbacks to arrest and execute rebel leaders. There's a wanted list, and Mr. Randolph is on it. Williamsburg's militia escorted Mr. Randolph to the safety of his house last night, fearing Dunmore might try to arrest him on the road. We boy volunteers were there, too, to greet him. So that was the commotion Nathaniel had heard. The Randolph home was 2 blocks away from Eden's house. In the loft, as he puzzled over a long set of sums, Nathaniel had heard a low roar of huzzahs. But that was not such an unusual sound in Williamsburg these days. Ever since Dunmore and his British Marines had emptied the magazine of its gunpowder, volunteer militiamen had been drilling on the open ground of Market Square. More and more out-of-town frontier marksmen were arriving too, clad in homespun hunting shirts that fell to their knees and covered leather leggings. They were weather-beaten and hardy crude in their language and manners. One had terrified Miss McGuire the other morning when she'd tripped over him, sleeping in their orchard. "You should have seen us, Nat. Oh, we were so grand. Robert Greenhow got a copy of the Manual of Military Exercise as ordered by His Majesty from his father. We've been practicing all its drills. We marched right up to Mr. Randolph's front door, and everyone there said—" At that moment Eden stomped through the door. He was breathing hard and holding a hand up to his chest, rubbing it as if trying to push something away from his heart. He shuffled to his desk, sat down with a thump, and took up his pen. Ben and Nathaniel pretended to be busy. After much scribbling and muttering, Eden grunted to Nathaniel, "Take this notice to the Gazette. All the high and mighty Burgesses are in town. Several owe me money. This should scare them into paying me." He shoved the slip of paper at Nathaniel and barked at Ben. "About work, boy." "What would you have me do?" Ben's question was earnest and for once free of sass. "We've no order, sir." Indeed, new work had ground to a halt, and it wasn't just due to the disappearance of John and Obijah. With the embargo hurting everyone's purse and the Continental Congress cautioning against frivolous purchases, nobody was buying large items such as carriages. Eden's finances were decaying rapidly. Eden threw his head back and laughed, a guttural, crazed sound. "No work?" He grabbed at his chest again, bending over and coughing. "Dreams will ruin you. Customers will misuse you. People will turn on you." His unnatural laugh continued. "What can you expect from a pig but a grunt?" Eden stumbled out of the shop toward the house, chanting, "A grunt, a grunt, a grunt." Ben stared after him. He held his hand out toward Nathaniel. "Let us read that notice. I request those gentlemen that are indebted to me pay me immediately, that I may thereby support my credit and be enabled to carry on my business. The many disappointments I have met force me to let those gentlemen know that unless they discharge their respective balances this meeting, their names will be inserted very shortly in all the Williamsburg papers, that the world may know how tradesmen are treated in Virginia. E. McGuire." Ben let out a long whistle. "That'll get some backs up," he grinned and added, "That might spur the committee to finally take action they speak of, which in turn should push Eden to go home to Ireland. Then we'll be free, Nat, free." He did a little jig. Nathaniel was completely baffled. "What are you talking about, Ben?" The apprentice was acting as crazed as Eden. "Oh, nothing," Ben answered mysteriously. "You know, if there's no work, I think I'll just meander down to the store to see when the greenhouse think we'll drill again. Hop to the Gazette, boy," he teased Nathaniel, snapping his fingers, once again imagining himself the congressman. Not knowing what else to do, Nathaniel put on his round hat and followed orders.